What I saw on April 29th, 1945, at a POW camp outside Moosburg, Bavaria, I need you to hear it. Not because it's a war story, not because it's history, but because what George Patton did that morning is the most important lesson about leadership. He didn't send a delegate, he got in the jeep, and that made all the difference. Let me tell you what happened. My name is James Walker. In April of 1945, I was 15 years old. Yes, 15. I know what you're thinking. How does a 15-year-old boy end up in the United States Army in the middle of the deadliest war in human history? The answer is simple, and it's a little embarrassing, and I'm too old now to be embarrassed about anything. I lied. I walked into the recruitment office in the spring of 1944, stood up as straight as I could, puffed out my chest, and told the officer behind the desk that I was 18 years old and ready to serve my country. He looked me up and down for a long moment. I held my breath. He picked up his pen. And he didn't say a word about my age. Maybe he knew. Maybe the war needed bodies badly enough that he decided not to ask questions. Maybe he saw something in my eyes that told him arguing would be a waste of both our time. Whatever the reason, I became a soldier. My mother thought I was staying with a friend across town. My father was already fighting in Italy. I was just a skinny kid from a small town who believed with everything in him that he had to do something. So I did something. I went to war. By April of 1945, the war in Europe was almost over. Almost. That word did a lot of heavy lifting in those final weeks. Almost over meant men were still dying. Almost over meant there were still German soldiers who hadn't gotten the message, or who had gotten it and didn't care. Almost over meant that tens of thousands of American soldiers were still locked inside prisoner-of-war camps, scattered across what remained of the Third Reich, waiting, hoping, praying that someone would come before almost turned into never. Our unit had been moving fast across Bavaria for days, town after town, white flags hanging from windows, German soldiers coming out with their hands up, looking more relieved than defeated. The war had broken something in them, and most of them were just glad it was breaking in a direction that meant they might survive it. Then our orders changed. We were redirected toward a town called Moosburg. There was a POW camp there. Stalag 7A, and the report that came down the line stopped every conversation in our convoy cold. 30,000 prisoners, 30,000 American soldiers inside that wire, pilots who had been shot down over Germany, paratroopers captured at the bridges in Arnhem, infantry boys taken during the desperate frozen chaos of the Battle of the Bulge, men who had been locked away for months, some for years, starving, beaten down, hanging onto life by threads they were slowly running out of. 30,000 of our men, and the SS commandant of that camp was refusing to let them go. His name was Colonel Heinrich Merkel. We knew the name before we ever saw the face. Word travels fast in a military convoy, and the word on Merkel was not good. He was SS, had been since before the war started. He had served on the Eastern Front, which meant he had seen and done things that most human beings cannot process. He had overseen forced labor operations. He was, in every sense of the word, a true believer, a man who had wrapped his entire identity around a flag that was now burning, and refused to accept that the fire was real. When American officers from our division approached the camp under a white flag that morning and demanded he surrender, Merkel met them at the gate in his full SS uniform, calm, cold, unmoved. His response was precise. "I am the commandant of this facility. These prisoners are under my authority. I have received no orders to release them. If you attempt to take this camp by force, I will consider it an act of war." The American lieutenant tried again. "Colonel, the war is over. Germany has surrendered." Merkel's expression didn't change. "I have received no official confirmation. The Führer fights on. These men remain my responsibility." "We have tanks, Colonel, artillery. We will take this camp." And that's when Merkel said the words that changed everything that morning. He stepped forward. "Then you will have to kill me first. I will not hand over a single prisoner while I am still breathing." The delegation came back to our lines. The report went up the chain of command. Within the hour, it reached Third Army headquarters. General George S. Patton was in his command trailer reviewing maps of the advance into Austria when his chief of staff brought him the message. I wasn't in that trailer. I was a 15-year-old private sitting in a jeep half a mile from the camp gates. But what happened in that trailer was told to me later by men who were there, and I have heard it so many times over 81 years that I can see it as clearly as if I had been standing in the corner. Patton looked up from his maps. "How many prisoners?" "Approximately 30,000, sir, most of them American." Patton's jaw tightened. These weren't just prisoners to him. These were Third Army men, soldiers who had fought under his command, under his flag, and had ended up behind German wire through no fault of their own. They had done everything right. They had been brave. And now they were starving inside a camp run by an SS colonel who was using them as a bargaining chip. "What's the commandant's name?" "Colonel Heinrich Merkel, SS, told our officers they'd have to kill him to get the camp." Patton stood up, walked to the map, found Moosburg, 15 miles from his current position. "Get my driver," he said quietly. His staff exchanged looks. They knew that tone. "Sir, we can negotiate. We can bring in—" Patton cut him off. "I don't negotiate with SS officers who hold my men hostage. Get my jeep. I'm going to that camp." "General, that's not— now." I heard him before I saw him, not Patton specifically. The convoy, the grinding, low rumble of tanks repositioning, the sound of boots hitting dirt, the sound of a military operation suddenly sharpening into something more focused, more deliberate. And then a single jeep came through, moving fast, moving with the kind of purpose that makes everyone around it stop and stare. It stopped near the front of our position. A man got out, 3 stars on his helmet, ivory-handled revolvers on his belt. Combat uniform, and the kind of posture that doesn't come from training. It comes from being completely, absolutely certain of what you are about to do. The soldier standing next to me was older than me, 22, maybe 23. He had been in since North Africa. He had seen things I hadn't. He was not the kind of man who got rattled easily. He went completely still. Then he said very quietly, "That's Patton." I had heard the name 1,000 times, every soldier had. But hearing a name and seeing the man are 2 entirely different things. And standing there, 15 years old, watching George Patton stride toward that gate like he had already decided how this was going to end. Something happened inside me that I still don't have the right word for. It wasn't just admiration. It was something closer to understanding. This is what it looks like, I thought. This is what it looks like when someone actually means it. Patton stopped 10 feet from the gate. He didn't hesitate. He didn't confer with his officers. He didn't pull out a radio or review a document or ask anyone for a briefing. He looked at the gate, and he called out in a voice that carried across that entire yard. "Colonel Merkel, I am General George S. Patton, commanding Third Army. I am here for my men. Open this gate and surrender your command. Immediately." There was a long silence. Then Merkel appeared. He walked out from the commandant's building slowly, crossing the yard alone. His officers stayed back. His guards stayed in the towers. He walked to the other side of the gate and stopped. 2 men, 15 feet of fence and barbed wire between them. "General Patton," Merkel said. His voice was steady, controlled. The voice of a man who had decided something and intended to hold to it. "I have told your officers my position. I cannot surrender this camp without orders from my superiors." "Your superiors are dead or captured," Patton said. "The Führer is dead. The government is gone. There are no more orders coming. There is nothing left to receive orders from. I have received no official confirmation. Colonel. Patton took one step closer to the fence. You are holding 30,000 American soldiers prisoner, my soldiers, men who fought under my command and ended up behind your wire, and you are telling me you will not release them because you haven't received a piece of paper from a government that no longer exists. Merkel stood rigid. I am following my orders. Your orders are dead. Your chain of command is gone. The only thing standing between these men and their families is you. I will not abandon my post. And this is the part I want you to hear. This is the part I have carried for 81 years. Patton's expression changed. The cold fury that had been sitting just below the surface broke through, but not in the way you might expect. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He stepped even closer to that fence, and when he spoke, his voice dropped to just above a whisper. But every single person in that yard heard every single word. Let me explain something to you, Colonel. I have spent 4 years fighting across 2 continents. I have seen things that would break most men. I have killed enemies who deserved to die, and I have killed enemies who were just following orders. But in all of that time, in all of those years, I have never met a man as pathetic as you. Merkel's face went pale. You stand there in your SS uniform, telling me you're following orders, telling me you're doing your duty. But we both know what you really are. You are a coward. You are a man who starved and beat prisoners for years, and now that the war is lost, you are using those same prisoners as a shield to save your own worthless life. The camp was absolutely silent. 30,000 men, barely breathing. You think holding these men gives you leverage. You think it makes you matter. It doesn't. It makes you nothing. Because when I walk through that gate, and I will walk through that gate, you have exactly 2 choices. You open it now and surrender like a soldier, or you force me to take it, and when I do, I will personally ensure that you are tried as a war criminal and hanged for every single thing you have done to the men behind that wire. He leaned forward. I don't care about your orders. I don't care about your loyalty to a dead Führer. I care about my men, and I am taking them home today. So make your choice right now, Colonel. Open this gate, or I will drive a tank through it, and you can explain to God why you chose to die for nothing. Silence. Long, heavy, absolute silence. Merkel's face was ashen. His hands were shaking. Whatever certainty he had carried for years, whatever faith had kept him standing at that gate, it was gone, dissolved under the weight of those words and the reality they carried. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, he spoke. What guarantee do I have that my men will be treated fairly? Patton's answer came without a single second of hesitation. You have my word that they will be treated according to the Geneva Convention, which is more than you gave the men you held prisoner. Now open the gate. Merkel stood there one more moment. Then he turned, walked to the guard tower, gave a single hand signal. The gate swung open. What happened next, I cannot fully describe. I have tried for 81 years. I have told this story to my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. I have told it to journalists and historians and strangers on park benches. And every single time I reach this moment and the words fall short. 30,000 men, 30,000 men who had spent months, some years, behind that wire. Men who had stopped believing anyone was coming. Men who had learned to ration hope the same way they rationed bread, in the smallest possible portions, so that running out wouldn't kill them. When that gate opened, something broke loose inside all of them at once. The sound was not just cheering. It was everything those men had been holding for months, all the fear and the hunger and the loneliness and the waiting. It came out of 30,000 bodies simultaneously, and it was the most human sound I have ever heard in my life. Men were crying, men were laughing, men were holding each other, men who hadn't spoken in weeks were suddenly unable to stop. I was 15 years old, sitting in a jeep, and I was crying too. I didn't care who saw. Patton walked through the gate, and here is the thing that I have never forgotten, the thing that matters more to me than anything else about that day. He did not give a speech. He was George Patton, the most famous American general in Europe. He had just faced down an armed SS colonel and freed 30,000 prisoners. The moment was entirely his. He could have stood on a jeep and spoken for an hour, and every man there would have listened to every word. He didn't. He walked directly to the nearest group of American prisoners, men who were skeletal, hollow-eyed, barely standing, and he looked at them and said 3 words. "You're going home." That was it. Then he turned to his officers and started giving orders. Food, clothing, medical transport. He wanted every single man out of that camp before nightfall. No ceremonies, no photographs, just work. The work of bringing people home. That was George Patton, not the speeches, not the glory, the work. I am 96 years old. My knees hurt every morning. My hands shake when I try to write. There are whole years of my life that have gone soft and blurry at the edges, like old photographs left out in the sun. But April 29th, 1945 is sharp, every detail, every sound, every word. Because some things don't fade. Some things get written into you so deeply that time cannot reach them. What I learned that day, standing at 15 years old, watching George Patton walk through those gates, is something I have tried to live by for 8 decades. Leadership is not strategy. Leadership is not boldness. Leadership is not even fearlessness, though Patton had all of those things in abundance. Leadership is the decision, made quietly, without announcement, that these are my people, and I am going to them. Patton had every reason not to go to Moosburg personally that day. He had officers, he had negotiators, he had tanks and artillery that could have ended it without him ever leaving his trailer. He was a 3-star general with an entire army to command and an advance into Austria to manage. But those were his men behind that wire. And that word, his, didn't mean ownership. It meant, I will not sleep tonight if they are still in there. It meant no one else's hands on this. It meant get in the jeep. Colonel Merkel was arrested that same day. He was tried for war crimes, convicted, and sentenced to 25 years. He served 12 before dying in prison in 1957. The liberation of Moosburg became the largest single-day POW rescue of the entire war. And Patton, in his diary that night, wrote exactly 1 line about it. Liberated POW camp today. Brought my boys home. 1 line. 30,000 men. 1 line. Because for Patton, it wasn't history. It wasn't a story to tell. It was just his job. I have one thing left to say, and then I am going to let this old body rest. Somewhere in your life right now, there are people who are waiting. Maybe they haven't said it out loud. Maybe they don't even fully realize they're waiting, but they are behind their own kind of wire. And some part of them is watching the road, listening for the sound of tanks, hoping that someone is coming. Be the person who comes. Don't send a message. Don't delegate. Don't wait for the paperwork to be right, or the timing to be perfect, or someone else to handle it first. Get in the jeep, because I promise you from 96 years of living, from one morning in Bavaria that I will carry to my last breath, the people waiting on the other side of that gate will remember it for the rest of their lives. Not what you said, not how brave you looked, just that you came.